The Utah Utes scored a massive visit this weekend with one of the top offensive linemen in the class of 2025. Could he be a future Utah Ute? We're going to discuss on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time listening to this show, make sure you like and subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code Locked On College, all caps, no spaces, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. My name is JT Wistrcill, and on today's show, we have massive recruiting news that we need to cover. Also going to be talking about if it's good that Utah doesn't have the same preseason expectation that they had in years past, and talk about a very interesting college football playoff future comment that was made by a major college football coach at the very end. But as I mentioned, we have to talk about some massive news, and that's Utah picked up a monster visit with Felix Ojo, a five-star offensive lineman who is the fifth-ranked player in the nation, the number one ranked offensive tackle in the nation, and the second-ranked player in the state of Texas. Kind of surprised everyone with a surprise late visit to Utah. The 6'6", 275-pound offensive lineman from Texas is already crystal balled from 24/7 to go to Texas, but he is using up his visits, and it's really encouraging that he is going to be checking in on Utah. He's made a number of visits so far. He's gone to Colorado, Ole Miss, Texas Tech, Florida, Ohio State, Michigan, and Texas. All of them have had him in for a visit, according to On3, and this is massive for Utah. You can get a guy who, whether it's 24/7 is the fifth-ranked player, number six-ranked player. This is massive that Utah is landing a visit, and he's gotten several visits. He is crystal ball to Texas. This is an uphill battle. This was kind of a late visit addition, so this is massive, and we talked about this before. Just because guys are crystal balled, heck, just because guys are committed doesn't mean things can't change. I mean, this is going to be the go-to saying on this show, and you're probably going to hear it on a lot of shows now, right? Dan Lanning jumped in a pool with a guy, and then what happened? He didn't commit to him, or he decommitted from him a few weeks later, right? So nothing is over in the recruiting world until it's over. So Utah absolutely is going to have a chance at Ojo. Some stiff competition here, obviously NIL-wise too. I mean, anytime you're going against Texas, Ohio State, Michigan, Florida we know Texas Tech can. Like Utah is by far of the NIL programs, if you were just to rank them. Although I should say the rev sharing is starting to try and change some of that, right? Like Utah does not rank as highly as some of those other ones. But the fact that Utah is able to get this visit is a massive deal. And look, Ojo is a heck of a player, just turning on the tape. The first thing that stands out is just his length and just overall stature, like his size. He has incredible arm length, and he's just has a massive figure and build that makes it incredibly hard to get around. He also has incredibly long arms, so he's getting his hands on you right away as a physical punch, and that's something you can notice on tape right away. Also plays in Texas, so has been going against elite competition for a couple years now too, but he absolutely stops guys in their tracks so frequently. Road grader in the run game. Probably needs to work on pad level a little bit, but look, that's a nitpick. This guy, if he came to Utah, this is the Spencer Fano, this is the Caleb Lomu replacement. Doesn't feel like that long ago on this show we were talking about how, Utah's going to lose Spencer Fano after this year. He's getting all the accolades. But it wasn't long after that the NFL draft scouts, who always get ahead and are always talking NFL draft turned their attention to Utah and just to next season. And as they were watching Spencer Fano, they uncovered something else they like a lot. Caleb Lomu. At least right now, it doesn't seem like Caleb Lomu or Spencer Fano are making it out of the first round of the NFL draft. And why that hurts Utah in a way, because they're going to lose two first-round offensive linemen. You're also losing two first-round offensive linemen. So what does that say to recruits? I can come to Utah, and I can eventually become a first-round offensive lineman. Not just one day become a first-round offensive lineman, too. What does Utah give you a better chance of that a Michigan and Ohio State don't? You have a better chance to play at Utah right away than you do at those schools. Just simply put, if you go to Ohio State, Michigan, more than likely you're playing behind 4 and 5 stars. So you got to wait at least a year or two till you get out there. If you're Ojo and you come to Utah right away, like this is a day one start. You can just see it. I mentioned the pad level being a nitpick, but like this guy is an absolute monster. I mean, he is going to be, if Utah can find a way to land Ojo, it would be an absolute game changer, especially for a recruiting class that they haven't done a lot of work in yet. A recruiting class that Utah has lost some of the best in-state battles in recruiting terms to BYU. Brock Harris is going to BYU. Bamuli Tolo is going to BYU. Helaman Kasuga, he's going to Texas, one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And Celeste Moa, we're still waiting to see on him. But, man, if you could land Moa and Ojo, like that's incredible. So this would be a monster win for Utah Utes recruiting. It's a pivotal weekend visit. And I think the biggest thing is, you got to figure out the NIL aspects, the rev sharing, right? How much can you, and that is already a thing. Like, how much of that are you willing to commit to a guy like Ojo? How do NIL deals factor in that? Could you make something like that work? But I think the number one thing by far you are pitching him on, because if you were just getting into NIL, I don't know all the inner workings of Ohio State NIL, but we heard a lot last year about they spent $20 million on their roster. We know Utah didn't spend $20 million on their roster last year. It's pretty safe to assume. And I should say Texas is the heavy favorite to land him, so I should probably compare it to Texas. Either way, Utah doesn't have Texas NIL. So what are you pitching Ojo on? Come in, play right away, and have a chance to win too. I know Utah had a down year, but we're going to talk about in the second segment a little bit more. Is just like, is it good that Utah doesn't have the preseason expectations? Let's not forget that this is a team that 3 years in a row won 8 or more games, 2 of those years being 10 or more games, and they went 8-5 with a backup quarterback. And then last year, the wheels fall off. They were at 5-7 overall, but just talk with Jason Beck. It just like have those conversations. Feel like, hey, is this a group you trust to turn it around? Because it's definitely a group that I trust to turn it around. I feel like that this is a Utah team that is trending in a very positive direction. I feel like this is a Utah team that recruits should look at too and be like, okay, this is something I want to be a part of. And also, I'll go back to once again, like, if you come to Utah, what can you do? Play right away. Guys want to be a part of the best teams. Like, Ojo probably wants to win a national championship, right? So, like, I understand why he'd be leaning towards Texas, Ohio State, Michigan, all teams that have either won national championships recently or have been, like, to deep runs in the college football playoff. But these guys also want to play. Like, they don't want to sit back and like, you've just spent your whole life playing. You're used to being big man on campus, like being the guy. And then all of a sudden you get to this other school and you got to play behind 4 and 5 stars and you're not the man anymore. And now all of a sudden, like, you have to sit out a year. That's not fun. These guys put in so much time, energy, and effort to be the best at their craft. It sucks not to play. Now, sometimes you can go to those places and get developed and be the best guy, but especially at offensive line, Jim Harding has shown the ability to do a great job. What did we just talk about at Utah? You come to Utah, you're getting great coaching. 2 offensive linemen from Utah's group this year seem likely to be first-round picks next year. Ojo could very well be in the future conversation for that if he gets the kind of coaching that Jim Harding can offer. And once again, he can play right away, have a chance to win Big 12 championships right away, because I do feel like, especially in the Big 12, you can compete every year. Utah has a ton of talented pieces here, especially if you get Devin Dampier to come back for another year after this one. I feel like, and Wayshawn Parker too, like, I think this Utah program almost every year is going to have a chance to win the Big 12. It's just a very open conference. It's not even like I'm saying that as in like, oh, Utah is just superior to everyone. It's a very open conference, and Utah's history is obviously incredibly impressive. Ojo has taken note of their offensive lineman development. Hopefully he takes note of that history, the winning pedigree that this program has, and hopefully Utah is able to make a strong impression this weekend. Very stiff competition. We mentioned all those teams: Texas, Ohio State, Michigan, Colorado, Texas Tech, Florida. I mean, that's tough to beat out. But the fact that Utah's scoring this late of a visit is a positive sign. And hopefully Utah can close the deal. It'll be easier said than done. And I don't expect an announcement to come this weekend. I expect him to take some time after he's had all his visits. We already said he's crystal balled to Texas, so it's going to take a lot of convincing, but just massive that Utah's able to get this visit, especially when their 2026 recruiting classes not looking the best so far. So really excited that Utah's landed his visit. We're going to continue to monitor this, and there will continue to be stories about what Ojo thought of his visit this weekend. But really love that Utah is having the number 1 ranked offensive lineman in the country up on campus this weekend. That is massive, no matter the outcome of a commitment. Although we definitely want a commitment. Coming up, we're going to talk about Utah. If it's good that this Utah team this year doesn't have those preseason expectations to win the Big 12 like they did last year. Preseason expectations, just what do we think? Are they good? Are they bad? How does that relate to and affect this Utah team? We're going to talk about all of that in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your personal accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you can stop just managing your money and start building wealth. There's a surprising insights. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save way more. It's also that easy collaboration. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year, all caps, no spaces. Head over to Monarch Money to help start budgeting smarter today. Preseason expectations, something that plagued Utah last year, you could say. Everyone was picking them to win the Big 12, not just on this show, but all of the basically major media members, because Utah on paper looked like they'd be fantastic. And then injuries happened and other things too, obviously, and Utah was not fantastic. So this year, Utah is flying under the radar. So I think it just poses the question, is preseason hype good or bad? Well, if we were to ask Kyle Whittingham and just coaches in general, they would say it's always better to be the underdog. Utah has done better probably overall when they have been counted outright, but also I would once again just say, like, more so due to injuries has this team fallen short of expectations when they've had that preseason hype, right? Like, we didn't get to fairly see if Utah could win the Big 12. And also I'd say, like, even if Utah didn't win the Big 12 last year, like, technically it was falling short if they were still a top 4 team. It's still a major accomplishment because it is incredibly hard to win conference championships. We saw Utah struggle with this for so long. But I go back to what I said. Kyle Whittingham, or honestly, I've talked to several college coaches. It doesn't matter the sport. Like, if you ask them, what do they think about preseason rankings, preseason expectations, all that stuff, they don't care. Because all of that stuff is built on something that you haven't proven. And that's something, like, you ask any coach about it, they'll tell you that they're not going to love that stuff because none of that is earned. It's all done on paper, preseason ranking. And also, what does it do? It paints a target on your back, which is something that, coaches will embrace that. But obviously it's something where it's like, we have this target on our back for nothing we did, for something we did. Like, sometimes it's last year and, hey, we got to go in and defend our title. But like last year's thing, Utah had a target on their back simply because everyone in the media was saying, hey, I think this is the best team in the Big 12, which Big 12 fans got really offended by because how could this Pac-12 team come in and win the Big 12? And what was so funny about that is, while Utah fell short, Arizona State, a team who was dreadful in the Pac-12 a season ago, came in and won the Big 12 right away. So in a way, that logic and narrative actually ended up being correct, right? It just didn't happen to Utah. It happened to an ASU team that no one saw coming. So that's why I think it's always funny. But yeah, I think if you look at it overall, like, preseason expectations, is it good or bad? I don't think it matters. Honestly, I've always been someone, I like when Utah is the villain, and I will say justifiably the villain. Sometimes on the Big 12 squad, we'll talk, right? And they'll say, like, some people already proclaim Utah as the villain of this conference year in and year out. I think last year, in a way, Utah was. I don't know how they're the villain this year. I mean, maybe if you could just say because of some fans on social media, I guess, but like, that's what I think is also funny. Sometimes you hear people being like, oh, Utah fans are so awful, they're crazy. Every college football fan has crazy fan bases. So I think that stuff gets ridiculous and thrown out of proportion. It's like, oh, just Utah fans. People just get mad because we're passionate. So I don't buy that crap that Utah's worse than all the other fans out there. But anyways, preseason hype, as I mentioned, I like it when the villain counted out. Like, I think all that stuff is a lot of fun, but obviously coaches prefer to be the underdog. They like to be, because that's a big thing for motivation too, right? Stereotypical, like, high school speech or whatever, like, no one believes in us. Like, no one thinks you're good enough to be here. Like, that's a real thing. And also it does work really well for motivation, right? When people count you out, I mean, I don't know what lengths these Utah players go to motivate themselves by viewing this stuff, but you always hear the noise, right? I think it was Wayshawn Parker just a couple weeks ago. Like, Utah's backfield was ranked outside the top 60 by Phil Steele. I think Utah's going to shatter those expectations. I understand a little bit the trepidation and ranking them higher, but it's a pretty good offensive line. And I think Wayshawn Parker is set for a big sophomore. I shouldn't say step up because he's really good as a freshman, but I expect him to be, I think he's got a great shot to hit 1,000 yards this year. We'll see how much Utah gives him the lion's share of the carries, but I have big expectation for Wayshawn Parker this year. I think he is going to have himself one heck of a season. So once again, like, preseason expectations, are they good or bad? I think that I really feel indifferent about it. Coaches would say they don't love them. I know you guys, a lot of times I see you guys say, like, oh, whenever Utah's, like, people think Utah's going to be really good, that's when they underperform and things of that nature, which is true in some ways, but not fully true. because yes, Utah was obviously counted out when they won the Pac-12 title that first year in 21, because what did they do? They started 1-2. They just lost to not just BYU, which wasn't that bad of a loss on the road, right? But then San Diego State, that was a bad loss. And you had just switched to a new quarterback. Like everything was totally in flux. How are you going to survive a Pac-12 gauntlet? And they did. And they only lost to Oregon State, and they beat Oregon twice. And it was crazy. And then when did Utah come in last year? USC was the favorite. And then USC was the favorite, and then Utah was second, right? Like that's how it was. So Utah still had obviously preseason expectations and hype to be really good. And what did they do that season? They met those expectations. Did they need some help to get in? Yes, I'm not saying that. But at the end of the day, the preseason hype was this team will win the Pac-12. And Utah went out and won the Pac-12 with 2 incredibly impressive performances and victories against USC. And that's something that is so cool. Still, we can look back on this Utah program. That's why it gives me hope and faith too that Utah can one day break through and get an upset against a blue blood in the college football playoff, because we saw them do it against USC and Oregon. I still like to say it's hard to beat a good team twice, but Utah made that phrase look foolish those 2 years when they did that both times. That Oregon team was definitely in a weird spot though, with everything happened with Cristobal, and then some of the weird things that happened with Lincoln Riley's teams have definitely been interesting though too. And then Utah fell short of expectations, but once again, injuries. Brant Keithy, Cam Rising, right? I mean, how many of Utah's defensive linemen were in and out last year at various points, right? Even Mekhi Bernard was battling hurt, although he was out there, so I probably shouldn't bring that one up, right? But once again, like preseason expectations, good or bad, I'm good with them either way. I like it when people are like, oh, they feel like Utah's really good. I kind of enjoyed ruffling the Big 12's feathers last year, but I totally get why coaches are against them, because you are giving awards. Same thing with a lot of those preseason watch list awards. It's a really cool honor, but it's why so often when media members ask athletes, oh, what do you think of this reward? And they're just like, oh, it's nice and cool, but honestly, I haven't done anything to deserve that. So most athletes' goals, I should say, like their goals are eventually individual awards, but first and foremost, more than likely, it's a team goal. I got to imagine most guys on Utah's roster, their top goal, right, is to win the Big 12, make the college football playoff. And then some of the other ones, Spencer Fano might have an offensive line. Honestly, it'd be awesome if Utah, I think it's the Jim or Joe Moorhead Award, I think is the offensive line award. It'd be sick if Utah could win that this year. I've talked before. I think they're going to be really good. I don't know if they're going to be best offensive line in the country good, even though I think they could very well have 2 All-Americans on this team at tackle. We've talked about the questions at interior offensive line before. So it'll be interesting to see what Utah is able to do there, right? But once again, the goals for this team will be team oriented before individual oriented. So preseason expectations, they're never something that I think carry too much merit in terms of like, obviously we do shows on them, but like this is the fact of what Utah is going to be. That's not how I view them. But I think sometimes they can be used as motivation. So that's where they can become a good thing. But then if you're overvalued on them or just towards the top, you probably don't pay too much of a mind to them, because then you don't want to get a big head and slip up and let things happen that way. So it's always an interesting thing. I know you guys a lot. Let me know what you think about it. I've seen the comments all the time that you guys like that we're being doubted because you feel that Utah does better when they're doubted. And I think for the most part, that's true. But as I mentioned, if Utah won the Big 12 this year, I think they'd have the same chance to win it again next year. A good opportunity. It's a competitive conference. It's definitely going to be tough to do, right? So that's where it's going to be interesting to see what this Utah squad can do. And the preseason expectations, yes, Phil Steele had them finishing second in the Big 12, only to Baylor, right? But most major way too early, I guess it's not way too early. We're in the middle of June now, right? But like most too early college football rankings have Utah finishing where? They have Utah anywhere from like 12 to top 5 for the most part. Some in the top 4. I think it's likely Utah's in that top 4. I've talked about that before. Don't know if Utah's going to win the conference. By the time the season rolls around, I'll probably predict them to do so. But this is a Utah team that I do think's in for a bounce back. So, but either way, middle ground expectations. Last year, Utah did fall short. In years past, they've surpassed those expectations. They've surprised people too. They've met them. So be interesting to see what this team does this year. But let me know in the comments, how do you guys feel about expectations and preseason hype? Is it good? Is it bad? Let me know your thoughts. Speaking of thoughts, Brett Bielema, the not offensive line coach, but the coach at Illinois, spoke to reporters in Chicago about a potential CFP expansion. This comes to us from Nicole Auerbach of NBC Sports, who quoted Bielema as saying, and was asked about, hey, like potential college football playoff expansion. Everyone has thoughts for it. We've heard some of the crazy ideas the SEC, the Big Ten have do. Brett Bielema has posted his own idea, what he wants to do, right? So this is what Brett Bielema thinks about all the CFP expansion talk. I don't think there's any way we could do a 16-team playoff if the SEC is not a 9-game conference schedule. We voted unanimously as a Big Ten coaches to stay at 9 and actually maybe have an SEC challenge. I was told that they voted unanimously to stay at 8 and not play the Big Ten. But then some people pop off and say what they want to say because they want to look a certain way. That line at the end right there. Some people say what they want to say because they want to look a certain way. Some of the Diego Pavia comments this last week have rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, he has talked a lot of junk for a team. Yes, they beat Bama last year. It's a bad loss. They lost to, I think it was Georgia College, like not the Bulldogs, not Georgia State, like they, or not Georgia Tech, like maybe it was Georgia State. Like it was a bad, like group of 5 loss. Like someone, if you're talking about running the SEC and some, which they said they're going to run Tennessee, which based on what the Vols continue to build and bring in, I don't see that being the case personally, but we'll wait and see what happens, right? But I just feel like I see this a lot from SEC fans, coaches, and now the players. Like one of Pavia's quotes is like, why would I go to the Big Ten when the best is in the SEC? It's like, well, why didn't the SEC do better than last year then? It's like, oh, it's just such a gauntlet. It's a grind. Like Kentucky didn't beat a single other SEC team except for Ole Miss. It's like, well, it's just parity. Upsets can happen. Yeah, that's college football. It's not just the SEC. It can happen anywhere. So some of the propaganda that continues to get put out by the SEC, and because Kalen DeBoer, who's someone I still really like, I think he's a good coach, but I think some of that SEC just I'm trying to figure out the right word to even say it, but the SEC just bias is affecting him because then he's like, I wonder how SMU would have done if they had your schedule. Like, I don't know, but I just know if y'all beat Oklahoma and y'all beat Vandy, you're in the college football playoff. So what happened to handling your own business and then letting the rest of the stuff take care of itself? That's what's funny. That's what the coaches will preach to their players, but then they don't handle their business and they still want to get rewarded for things. I think it's just funny how that kind of works when the narrative doesn't benefit or fit you too. And this is just also where it's just frustrating again. And this does affect Utah because this is a fairness thing too, right? Like, yes, the SEC and the Big Ten are the best conferences, but Utah is challenging themselves more when they play a 9-game conference schedule than the SEC if they're going to play an 8-game. Because what does the SEC do? They will play 4 games more likely than not. And I'll give like some passes, right? LSU is going to play Clemson this year. LSU last year played USC. So we do see some of these teams play a high-level opponent. But a lot of times, all 4 of those games, like the non-SEC games, will be cakewalks. The Citadel times 5, for lack of a better example. Like all of these games will be just like cakewalks. And it's infuriating when you're going out there and having to play a conference opponent. And I understand their SEC opponents sometimes can be a little bit better, but to me, that doesn't mean that you all of a sudden get a bye. Like that's just where it's so icky. And we continue to hear about this SEC and Big Ten, SEC, Big Ten gap. And even the SEC's tried to claim they're so much better than the Big Ten, which is funny since the Big Ten's at back-to-back national champions. Also, I did not see a single SEC team in the college football playoff championship game. Funny how that works when they're clearly far and away the best conference and you had all these chances to get in and do that. So, and I talk about this all the time, so I'm sorry, but like Illinois beat South Carolina. Everyone told me South Carolina needed to be in. I understand bowl games are a little different. If you're so much better, go beat Illinois without some of your top guys. I really don't care. Michigan was such a terrible loss for Ohio State. Then why'd they beat Alabama in the bowl game? Like, there's just like the selective memory of just like they want us to only focus on these things. And Greg Sankey brought that pamphlet out a few weeks ago. It's just like, what are we doing here about like, oh, the SEC is always the best? And it's like, well, just go prove it. Like, just go win games. That's what it comes down to. And I know it's tough when some of your other conference teams are also good too, but the best of your conference needs to rise to the top and then do that in the college football playoff. And if you go and win out on the field, we're not going to say anything. But then when you lose on the field and try to correct and change history, like, oh, we should have been in, we should have been this, we should have been that, we're just going to look at you and be like, now you're just trying to change and make up and talk crazy crap, right? So I do think it's unfortunate that the SEC does not want to move to 9 conference games, continuing to take the easier path, and that they didn't want to do the Big Ten Challenge. This is something I talked about. I think I boasted on this show in a previous episode, but I've talked about it with several people before. I would love it if the SEC and Big Ten, and then let's turn it back to Utah and the Big 12 a little bit, and the Big 12 and the ACC did a challenge where each year, let's say Utah finished 8th in the Big 12. Obviously, we don't love that. Maybe let's go 3. Let's be a little more positive, right? Utah finished 3rd in the Big 12. And then let's say Clemson finished 3rd in the ACC. Utah would be paired up with Clemson in a game that next season. And you would rotate who's home. Not just Utah, Clemson every year, but like this year, all the ACC teams are home. Next year, all the Big 12 teams are home. And then how would that affect the Big 10 and SEC? It's the same dang thing. Ohio State and Texas, coincidentally, they're playing this year, but like the two teams, well, I guess Ohio State actually didn't win the Big 10. So that'd be Oregon playing Georgia. So like Oregon and Georgia playing each other would be awesome. And also, I'd love it if it was on a true neutral site. That's one thing I always think is a little funny, right? Is like Georgia might talk about like, man, remember when we played Oregon, we beat the crap out of them? You played them in Atlanta, like with a incredibly heavy Georgia crowd. Week 1 of the college football playoff, everyone's takeaway tried to be, I feel like, oh, look at how much SMU didn't belong in and Indiana didn't belong in. But then Tennessee got steamrolled that night. And I think what the takeaway actually was, wow, some of the best teams in the country are, when they get to play at home, good luck trying to beat them because it's incredibly hard to do. That's what the takeaway really was from week 1. That's why we moved to neutral site field games after that, right? And then it was incredibly tough. And not even in some instances, right? And also every game's just different outcome. Any given Saturday has to be protected, right? Some games, Ohio State's going to blow out Oregon. Oregon beat them earlier in the regular season. Other games, you're going to have Arizona State on the verge of getting blown out by Texas, and then they should have won that game if they can just get a stop on 4th and 13. So it's just unfortunate that this is what we're at right now with college football, that you have the SEC continuing to try to just be like, oh, we don't need to change anything. We're not going to play the same number of conference games. We're not going to challenge ourselves in the same way you are, Big Ten, which the top of the Big Ten was better than the top of the SEC last year. That was proven just by the results. But we're going to claim we're better. That's bad for the sport. So hopefully one day that gets in check. I think it's going to be tough to do so, but I'm hoping the SEC will make some of those changes. And I would love to see, I've said before, 16 is a little much for me, but we're heading in that direction. We're going to get 16. I don't want 4 auto bids. I just want the best. I like your Mark's model had it best to me. The best, well, the 4 highest power, like P4, the conference champions, and then the best group of 5 team, and 11 at-large teams. That's great for the sport. But I like 8. I think 8 was the best number too back then, but we're not going to get that. But hopefully we can just get this more fair, I guess is the best way. Or just I want something where the SEC can't just like try to make themselves an easier path and then just scream and cry when they don't get their way. It's incredibly infuriating. So we'll see what this all amounts to being. But I love that Brett Bielema has kind of continued to call it out and keep it real with the SEC, with like just the SEC stuff that's been going on. And obviously he got into Shane Beamer a while ago. So that was funny too. But I would love to see Utah play like I said, Big 10, SEC might play each other a lot. Big 12 and ACC should do the same thing. I would love to see that. So we'll see what all happens. We'll see what all shakes out. Definitely feels like we're headed for 16 teams, though. That's going to do it for today's show. Make sure you guys leave your thoughts below on Utah's 5-star offensive line visit, what you think about expectations, and even what you want to see in the future of the college football playoff. Always look forward to hearing your guys' thoughts. Also, if you're in the market for a second listen today, make sure you check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to college football's landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you next week on Locked On Utes.